Welcome to the Oracle ADF Insider. My name is Dmitry Nefetkin and I am Fusion Middleware Consultant in Oracle ISV Migration Center team. Today I'm going to show you how to enable single sign-on for the ADF security-enabled application using Oracle Access Manager 11G. And that's the agenda of my demo. We'll start with the review in the demo environment and next proceed with the steps that allow us to enable single sign-on. First, let's have a look at the demo environment that I have. It consists of a couple of Fusion middleware homes, and the first home, as you might see, contains the binaries for the Oracle ADF 11.1.2.1 and WebLogic Server binaries as well. I have configured the domain named ADF_domain, and also in this middleware home I have the binaries for the web tier 11.1.1.5 and the Oracle Access Manager WebGate 11.1.1.5.1. I haven't configured the Oracle HTTP server instance and WebGate instance as well. They will be configured as a part of my demo. And the second middleware home contains the WebLogic binaries plus the binaries for the identity management, which had been used to create the Oracle Internet Directory instance, and the binaries of the identity and access management that I've also used to create the WebLogic domain with the admin server and the specific OAM_server1 hosting the Oracle Access Manager. If we'll have a look at the runtime environment that we have, you see the couple of domains, ADF domain with the admin server and the specific ADF_server1 hosting my ADF application named ADF Security APP. And basically my application is using Oracle database, the standard HR schema, and it is also integrated with the Oracle Internet Directory. And if you need more details on how to integrate your ADF application with the OID, you can look at another video that we've shared on the ADF Insider that helps you to understand how to work with the ADF security in the real production environments. And as you might see, my IDM domain is also integrated with the OID. It uses Oracle Internet Directory as the identity store, and we also have a specific schema def_OAM in the Oracle database, which is used to store the authentication and authorization rules for my Oracle Access Manager. So okay, let's now have a look at the demo application. Here's the Oracle Fusion middleware control for my ADF domain with the admin server and the ADF server 1. And we see the ADF security application deployed to the ADF server 1. And basically, if we'll go to the WebLogic console, to the security realms, and have a look at the list of the providers that have been configured in the list, we'll see the OID authenticator as the first provider in the list. And using JExplorer, we might see the details on what are the groups and what are the users inside the Oracle Internet Directory. For example, Alexander Unold and so on. And if I'll try to access my ADF application using the managed server port, I can definitely do that and enter the credentials for the Alexander Unold and his password. And of course I'm able to access the application, and you see some of the UI elements are accessible, the others are not, because of the fact that specific ADF security policies have been configured for this application. And we are going to integrate with the Access Manager for the login and logout links, and we want to be able to use OAM for the single sign-on and single logout in our application. Okay, let's proceed with this. Okay, let's install the Oracle HTTP server instance that will act as a reverse proxy for the Oracle WebLogic Server. So what we're going to achieve is the following configuration. Our user should be able to enter the port of the Oracle HTTP server, and Oracle HTTP server will proxy and send this request to the port of the managed server, so we'll be able to access our ADF security application through both the HTTP server port and the ADF managed server port. So in the middleware home, I'm going to change directory to the Oracle Web Tier home/bin and start the configuration wizard using config.shell script. And in the Web Tier configuration wizard, I'm going to do the following. I need Oracle HTTP server associated to the WebLogic domain as the only component in my environment. The host name will be test host test domain.com, and the port number, leave it as is, and the username for the WebLogic is, and the password is abcd1234. Go to the next step. Let's change the instance home location. Let's name it OHS instance 1, and instance name will be also the OHS instance 1, and I leave the OHS component name as is. Okay, we'll use the after port configuration. We don't need any security updates because that's the demo environment. We can review the installation summary and click the configure button. After some time, we'll see the progress bar, and we should see the new OHS instance has been created and started, and into the configuration summary we'll see the details and the URL to access the OHS. I can open it in the browser and we'll check that OHS is up and running. Now let's configure the OHS as a proxy server for the WebLogic managed server. To do that, I'm opening the Fusion middleware control, and in the web tier I see the OHS1 instance. I can see the details like what are the modules, what are the virtual hosts, what are the some performance characteristics of my server. And if I'll go to the administration mod WL OHS configuration, I can specify the details of my WebLogic server. The name of the host, test domain.com, and the port number, that will be the port of my managed server 7003. And next I should provide the match expression. I'm going to forward all the requests for the GSF pages, and the location will be /ADF security. So I'm specifying just the name of one application to be proxied by the OHS server. Let's press apply button, and that's a non-dynamic change. I should restart OHS server. I can do that through the Fusion middleware control. Just right click, Control, Restart. Press the restart button, wait a bit, and you see that restart operation completed successfully. Now I can try to access my application through the managed server port. Of course, that's available, and if I copy and paste the URL and change just the port number to the OHS port, I can also access my application using the OHS that acts as the reverse proxy for the WebLogic managed server. So let's just log in as a unode to make sure that everything is okay, that my application is still functioning as expected. Our next configuration step is to install Oracle Access Manager 11G WebGate inside Oracle HTTP server and register this WebGate in the Oracle Access Manager server. But before we'll go into the installation details, let's have a look what will be the sequence of the events when the user will try to access the ADF application when the WebGate has been installed and successfully registered in the OAM. So first, user tries to access the OHS port, and the request is forwarded to the OAM11G WebGate that is registered in the HTTP server. Next, the WebGate will communicate with the Access Manager server to find out if the resource is protected or not. Access Manager has the authentication policies defined in the database. That's why it will access the dev OAM schema to fetch what are the policies associated with this resource. If the resource is protected, Oracle Access Manager will challenge our user, asking him to provide some credentials. That might be a forms-based authentication or X509 certificate or Kerberos ticket. It depends on the Oracle Access Manager configuration. Let's imagine that user has been provided his credentials and they have been successfully verified using the identity store configured in the OAM. After that, the session will be created inside the OAM into the coherence cache, and also inside the browser will be OAM cookie created, and this cookie is corresponding to the OAM server session. OAM will redirect user to the WebGate, and WebGate also will set up specific so-called OAM authn cookie host port cookie inside the user browser. You see that this cookie contains host and port of the OAM WebGate, so if the user will communicate with the several WebGates, it will have several cookies inside his browser. And finally, WebGate will forward the request to the ADF application, to the page, to the resource that we have initially requested. So let's go into the configuration details. To create an instance of the WebGate, we should use a specific tool named deploy WebGate instance, and it is located in Oracle middleware 11.1.1 Oracle OAM WebGate 1, WebGate OHS tools deploy WebGate. And this tool accepts several parameters. The first is -w is the path to the config directory of the OHS, and the second -oh, that's the Oracle home of the WebGate. In our case, it will be pointing to the Oracle middleware 11.1.1 Oracle OAM WebGate 1. This command will copy several files to the WebGate instance directory, and now let's have a look what has been copied. Let's change the directory to the configuration dir of our OHS. And here you see new folder WebGate. And inside this WebGate folder we see the config directory, and right now we have just a one file, oblog config wg.xml, and for WebGate to be functioning correctly, we should also have a couple more files here, but they will be generated only after the WebGate registration in OAM. Right now what we should do is to link our OHS with the WebGate. To do that, we can of course change the httpd conf file manually, but there's another one possibility. There is a script named edit httpd conf, and we are going to use this script. It is located in the install tools directory. Edit httpd conf has the following parameters: -w pointing to the config directory of the OHS, -oh pointing to the WebGate Oracle home, and another one parameter -o points to the name of the WebGate configuration file. Okay, you see that httpd conf has been changed and backed up after the command execution, and we can open httpd conf, go to the bottom of the file and look at the new include directive that is pointing to the WebGate conf file. Now OHS and WebGate are tied together. Now it's time to register WebGate in OAM. To do that, there's a specific scripts provided in the Identity and Access Management home. We go into the Oracle IAM OAM server, and there is a script named OAM rec shell. But before we can launch it, we should create so-called request file. In the input directory there are several request files available, and we'll use one of them named OAM11G request short as a template for our custom request registration file. Let's name it my OAM11G request. And this request file should contain all the details for the registration of the WebGate in the OAM. First of all, the server address, the location of the Oracle Access Manager server. In my case, that will be http testhost testdomain.com, and the port number will be 7011. In Oracle Access Manager, there's a specific artifact named host identifier, and we should specify the name of this host identifier for our WebGate. We should also specify the name of the agent and of course the location of the agent. In my case, the agent is located in OHS, so the URL will be testhost testdomain.com, and the port is 7777. For each WebGate registered in the Oracle Access Manager, another one artifact is created named application domain, and we can specify the name of this application domain in the registration request XML file as well. Let's do that and name the application domain as rec test OAM11G. You also see the list of the resources, protected and public resources for our agent. Okay, let's change the rights for the OAM rec shell script. It should be executable, and before launching the script, you should make sure that Java home and OAM rec home environment variables are pointing to the existing locations. Let's export Java home pointing to the JDK that I have in my environment. And now I can issue OAM rec shell script specifying the parameters. In our case, in band means that we are the administrator both of the WebGate and OAM. Okay, we have received an error because of the fact that this script should be issued not from the bin directory but from the one level upper. So .bin OAM rec shell in band and the path to the request XML file. Input my OAM11g request. We are asked for the credentials of the administration user in the Access Manager. Let's enter the username and password. And I don't want a password for the WebGate and don't want to import any URI. And several seconds later, I will see the successful registration of my agent, and you see that output artifacts are created in the specific folder. Let's check this folder, cd output, and there is a subdirectory for my WebGate. And inside this subdirectory we see two files, cvalet SSO and OBXS client XML. These two files should be copied to the WebGate configuration directory. So to the web tier home instances, OHS instance 1, config, OHS, OHS1, WebGate. Config. And after that we should restart OHS. I have created a couple of simple scripts to be able to start and stop OHS. Let's have a look at the stop OHS script. We're just issuing opmnctl command with the stop all parameter. So let's stop Oracle HTTP server instance. Okay, let's start it again. We have another one script to test if the OHS is running or not, named status OHS1. OHS is running, and now I can try to access main page of the OHS via my browser. Test host test domain com 7777, and I see I was redirected to the OAM for the authentication. Let's enter the username and the password for some valid OID user like Lex Dehan. Click login button, and here it is. I was able to access OHS main page, which is now protected with the OAM server via the WebGate that has been successfully registered in the OAM server. Let's have a look what has been created in the OAM after the WebGate registration. Let's access the OAM console with the credentials of the OAM admin user. That's the ORCL admin in my case. And in the system configuration tab, I can click onto the Access Manager settings, SSO agents, and in the list of the OAM agents, I can find a newly registered agent, rrec test OAM11g. You see some parameters that we have here, like the port numbers, timeouts, and so on. And in the policy configuration tab, you might see the application domain that has been created for my WebGate. That's the description of the domain, and inside it we see the resources associated with the domain. In our request XML file, we already have several resources by default created for us, like public index HTML and so on. And you see that there's a resource with a slash 3./* that is pointing to any URL, and it is protected with the protected resource policy. Let's look at this authentication policy. You might see that it is tied to the authentication scheme named LDAP scheme. And let's have a look at this authentication scheme. Here it is. And the challenge method for this scheme is form, and the authentication module is LDAP. That's why we have seen the forms-based authentication when we tried to access our application, our main page of the OHS. So let's try to access our ADF application using the 7777 port. Okay, we have been redirected to the Access Manager. Let's enter the username and password of some valid user. Click Login, and what has happened? Nothing. We still see the login button here. So why our application still shows us the login button? Well, the answer is obvious. We should somehow tell to our application and to the overall WebLogic domain infrastructure that we can trust some identity which is propagated from the Access Manager to our application. Well, basically, when the request is forwarded to the ADF security APP from the WebGate, we have several cookies transferred, like OAM ID and OAM authn cookie host port, plus a specific HTTP header named OAM remote user is passed when the user has been authenticated via the OAM 11G WebGate. So we should do a couple of things. First of all, we should modify our application a bit to set up so-called perimeter authentication. So our application will start trusting some security tokens that have been issued by a third party, like Oracle Access Manager in this example. And the second, we should specify so-called OAM identity asserter into the security provider list inside the ADF domain. This identity asserter will analyze the cookies and HTTP headers in the incoming request and create WebLogic security subject based on this information. So let's proceed with the setup steps. To specify perimeter authentication for our application, we should modify web.xml. Please find the login config auth method and change the value to include so-called client cert. That's pretty okay in most of the cases, but in our case we also have the one problem with the code of the logout button. Let's find a managed bean method which is responsible for this code. In my case, that is method named logout. And right now what we're doing, we're just invalidating session, but when invalidating the HTTP session, and in case of the Oracle Access Manager that will not work, we should do the following. Instead of this, we are redirecting our user to the authentication ADF authentication servlet with the parameter logout equal true. And in this case, we can set up OPSS to forward our logout request to the OAM infrastructure. Okay, let's rebuild our application, create new ER file, and redeploy this application inside the ADF domain. I'm not showing how to redeploy this application. That is pretty easy to do. Now let's set up OAM identity asserter in the ADF domain. Let's go to the administration console of the ADF domain and click the security realms, pick our realm, and in the list of the providers, let's create a new one that will be the provider of OAM identity asserter type. You can name it as you like. I will name it OAM identity asserter. And let's go into the details of this provider. We are not going to change anything on the provider specific tab, but in common tab we'll specify the control flag as required and add the OAM remote user header and the list of the asserted headers. So what we're going to do next is to reorder the provider list, and identity asserter should be the first, or OAM identity as the first in this list. And let's also verify that two authenticator providers that we have, like OID and default authenticator, have the sufficient as the value for the control flag that is required for this configuration. And that's pretty it. We can activate the changes, and these changes are not dynamic. We should restart both the admin and the ADF managed servers, but we will do that a bit later. Well, single sign-on is one part of this story, but we also want our user to be logged off from all of the applications when we're clicking the logout hyperlink inside our ADF application. Before I will show what are the setup steps required for that, let's have a look at the sequence of the events when user tries to access the ADF authentication servlet with the parameter logout equal true inside his ADF security application. So first of all, of course, the request will be forwarded from the HTTP server to the web gate. Web gate will communicate with the OAM server to find out if we have the valid user session based on the OAM ID cookie or not. In this case, I'm not going to show this sequence of steps inside this picture. So let's imagine that user has the valid OAM ID cookie and the valid OAM 11G WebGate cookie as well, and request is being forwarded to the ADF security application. We don't want to hard code the logout URL inside our ADF application. We can specify it inside the OPSS configuration and just have a look to the OPSS to find out this URL and go to this URL. It is basically located on the WebGate, and the WebGate will forward the request to the Oracle Access Manager server because we want first of all to invalidate coherence session for our user. Next, we also want to invalidate the OAM ID cookie and all the agent cookies as well. After that steps, we can make sure that the user has been logged off from the not just our application but from the overall OAM environment. I forgot to specify the logout URL for our OAM WebGate during the WebGate registration, but we can change it easily. Let's log into the OAM console of our Access Manager domain, proceed to the System Configuration, Access Manager Settings, and find our Oracle Access Manager 11G agent that we've created before that. And in the settings of the agent, we may find the parameter named logout URL. Let's specify it with some value like OAM SSO logout.htm. Press apply button, and that's pretty it. This HTML file will be created dynamically for us, and we will specify it later inside the OPSS configuration. To change OPSS settings for the ADF domain, let's go to the Fusion middleware control, find our ADF domain inside it, and go to the security provider configuration. Let's find the single sign-on provider configure button and enable single sign-on configuration. Pick access manager as a store type in the list. Login URL can be left as is, and logout URL should point to the URL that we've just specified in the agent. So that's pretty it, and we are ready to restart our domain. Just return to the administration console of the ADF domain, and in the environment servers control subtab, let's pick both the admin server and the ADF server 1 and stop them. Of course, we should restart them after this operation, and we are ready to test our OAM to ADF SSO integration. Okay, let's access the main page of the OHS using the browser. It is protected with the WebGate, and we can enter the credentials of some valid user like Nina Kocher. And as a result, we see the main page of OHS. If we'll try to access the main landing page of our application after that, we see that we transparently access the application and we already logged in as Nina Kocher. We can log out as well and see the single sign-off process that has been executed. We can log in as some other user like Lex Dehan, enter his username and password in the Access Manager forms-based authentication window, and the same story, we have successfully been authenticated in our ADF application as well. So that's how you can set up Access Manager to ADF authentication, single sign-on and single logout scenarios. Of course, we haven't covered everything in this demo, and that's the list of the features that are outside the demo, and you should consult Oracle documentation to find out more details on that. So we haven't covered OAM binaries and domain creation, and we didn't specify the secure communication between the OAM WebGate and OAM web server. We haven't customized the login page for the Access Manager. That is definitely possible, and we used very simple scenario when the resource is protected by the forms-based authentication and user has been authenticated through the OID. You can create very complex authentication scenarios in OAM, like step-up authentication and using some custom authentication providers. Please consult Access Manager documentation to know more about that. And of course, any communication between WebLogic servers and OAM should be through the SSL, and that also the part of the demonstration that has not been covered. So thank you very much for your time, and if you want to know more about ADF and JDeveloper and related Fusion middleware products, go to the Oracle.com Tech Network JDev and download the binaries, tutorials, samples, guides, and so on. Thank you very much. Bye.